I'm your host, Laura Lynn, and you're listening to Grounded Spirits Podcast, a place where you learn about true self expression so that you can become 100% human and 100% divine all at the same time. In this episode, we go so deep into what that actually means. How is it possible to be 100% human and 100% divine simultaneously? Well, Amanda Kate, our guest, she gives amazing metaphors to understand this concept of being human and not being perfect and like having all of these different ways to go through life that's also paired with this divinity that's inside of you that just shines so bright. We just have to allow it to shine. That actually reminds me of something really quick that I've been trying to do this. That's why it's the whole point of the podcast, right? Is to understand how to self-express, because I don't know how to do it. And lately I've been noticing that I put the light is like outside of me and I'm like putting like a spotlight on myself, and I feel like that's like very ego based. And so now I have to figure out how to move that light to become like put it inside of me so I can become like a jack-o'-lantern where like the light is like shining out instead of just like putting the light on the jack-o'-lantern, because then it wouldn't be a jack-o'-lantern. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's like one way to like think about it. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Amanda Kate, our guest, and this episode. So in this episode, she gives so many great metaphors. She gives a metaphor on how to balance the masculine and the feminine, which has literally like cured me of like 30 years of trying to do this. She also gives an amazing metaphor about how to understand where people are on their journeys, and doesn't matter where they are on their journeys because we're all on the same journey, and so we're all equal, and so there's no point to compare with somebody else because you're doing your own thing and you're being your most authentic self. So as long as you're doing that, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. And that actually reminds me of a different thing about boundaries. By trying to figure out what everyone else is thinking, like you're passing that boundary. It shouldn't matter. It does not matter. And like you should have your boundaries for your mental health on just focusing on what makes you happy, because the right people will come, and you have to believe that. She also goes into kinesiology and how we can literally heal our physical bodies through healing through the trauma and everything else. And that was just really amazing. And yeah, this was just such a great conversation. You're going to learn so much. I completely guarantee it. And I'm just so excited for you to get to meet Amanda Kate after the break. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk about your book. So to begin with, though, could you share how you view self-expression? Like, how would you define self-expression?
I think as someone who never knew how to express themselves at all because they were so busy trying to please everybody, it has been a very gradual journey for me. It's been a lot of curiosity of what could I be? Because I didn't really start asking that question until, probably around my late 30s, of who actually was I outside of what I thought everybody else wanted me to be. And so coming into finding myself was, and still is, an exploration, because I don't, I know who I am today, but I know that also will change tomorrow and the next day and so on and so forth. So I think every day it is meeting it with curiosity of where am I at? Who am I? What do I want to be bringing into the world? Are the questions I have to ask, because, for 37 years I denied and was too afraid to tap into who I was. And I wasn't exactly supported in being who I was, because every time I was who I was, it would gain criticism and shaming, embarrassment, abuse, all of that sort of stuff. So
Wow.
it is a work in
Yeah.
progress.
Definitely, yeah, definitely work in progress. It's so incredible to hear my thoughts like reflected back at me through another person because everything that you're saying I completely resonated with. And I feel like that's why I started this part of the podcast to
Mm.
find out like how other people express themselves so that I could just like take little bits like what resonates with me and so that I can because exactly what you're saying, like the support is so necessary to have
Mm.
a safe space to be yourself and to not have those
Yeah.
criticisms to have that.
Mm.
And so just thank you so much for being so
Yeah.
open with that.
My
So
pleasure.
we're going to start with the mind. So how do you feel like you
Mhm.
express your mind? Could talk about your book or other ways that you express your mind.
For me, I find it really challenging to, these days especially, separate out mind, body, spirit, because to me, everything is so inextricably linked. And if I had to sort of, I guess, go into that mind part, the mind for me is the learning, it is the gaining of knowledge, the putting it into practice, and then the changing it into wisdom. So it's not just about information. Everyone has their hands on information these days. We are not in a lack of information place. Yet turning that information into knowledge where we actually understand, comprehend at a very deep level the information that we're taking in, but then living it and being able to express that in the world to create wisdom from our knowledge, that's the bit that I'm more interested in. So in terms of, kinesiology, in terms of the archetypal life coaching I do, in terms of, pretty much everything I bring into the world, it is really absorbing that knowledge, but then working out how does it apply to my life? How can it apply to my clients' lives? How is it useful? And living with it and embodying that so that it becomes wisdom. Because, I remember being asked, I know I need to do the work, but what is the work? And I'd be like, those self-help books you read, you actually need to implement some things from it to find changes. Reading them is wonderful, but if you're not actually doing the things in the books, you're not going to find change. And the person was like, I'm going, yeah. You
Yeah.
can't just read it and express things in the world and you're done. It's a process. And so that for me is the bit of the mind that I'm interested in, because we all have our different wisdoms. We all have our different lived experiences. And I think that's my biggest part of mind.
Yeah, definitely. So like when I think about the mind, it's like the overthinking part. So exactly what you're saying, you can
Mm,
overthink all you want and you can read all these books to stop the overthinking, but until you put it into practice, the
mm,
overthinking will still be there.
mm. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely agree. So now I know you said that the body and soul are so interconnected, but if you had to split it up, how do
Mm,
you feel about expressing your body? So going through maybe with the energies, or how do you
mhm.
view expressing it with your body?
I think it's really interesting because I was somebody who hated their body for so much of their life. And I know I'm not alone in that, being female. It's a natural thing that we are raised to do in a patriarchal society, is to hate ourselves. And I did for a long time. I lived that. And so now it is, at the moment, obviously post Christmas, post New Year, I was eating and drinking whatever I wanted, and I'm seeing the effects of it now. And I'm feeling sluggish. I'm not feeling my usual vibrant, happy, healthy self. Now I still love myself dearly. And I knew that this would be the case, that there would be that weight gain, there would be that, extra flabbiness that came on and all the rest of it. I think for me, that body is learning to be at home in this vessel, because for so long I felt disconnected from it. And so my journey with my body is about understanding it very, very deeply. And that again has taken years and years of learning about what it feels like to be in my body and being an empath, and in the way that I can walk past people on the street and feel their emotional state if I tune into it. And it used to be that I didn't even need to tune into it, especially when I started doing this work. I would just be overwhelmed with everybody's emotional state. Now I can differentiate between what's mine and what's other people's. And so I can release other people's stuff from my body much sooner so that I am just left with what's mine to deal with. I also understand the way my own healthy body feels, and so can feel when things are out of alignment. So that's why I'm saying at the moment, I can really feel that I'm not quite in alignment. And I know, starting basically today, is that, okay, we're done with all of the Christmas and New Year stuff. You need to get back on track. And there's no judgment in what I'm doing. Like I say, I made a conscious choice to be where I'm at and to do what I did. And yet I also know that my body is happier when I look after her better. And so it's really deeply knowing, okay, what is out of whack? Before Christmas, for example, I could feel that my adrenals were heading towards burnout. I had been recording so many different podcasts. I'd been working really hard. I had been doing so much in so many different areas. And I felt like I was kind of limping towards the end of the year. And I felt that coming on from about end of October, middle of November, roughly. So the end of the year for me was, okay, what can I do to still keep this momentum going in my business and also rest my body, nurture her, make sure that she is as well as possible through this. So there were more baths, there was more time on the beach, there was more time in nature, there was cleaner eating, there was all of those things to make sure that I didn't hit that proper burnout, because for me, burnout is a return of my chronic fatigue.
Yeah.
Mm.
Makes a lot of sense. Just thinking about it. So you as a kinesiologist, has that helped you understand your body more, or how has it helped you understand your body more?
Yeah. Look, I think a lot of it has, absolutely, especially the study that I've done, because, I did 6 years worth of study in 4 years to get to the level of kinesiology I have. Now, kinesiology in our part of the world is a bit different. It is about not just the movement of muscles and the movement of the body, it is the movement of everything. It is the movement of life force within us. It is the movement of chi, prana, you name it. And it's also the electrical signals that are going through the body. It is also about the way the body talks to each other. And so we look at the fact that everything in the body that is not vital and healthy is caused by stress. It's either physical stress, emotional stress, or chemical stress. And when our body is stressed like that, we exhibit dis-ease, that lack of wellness. And we're looking at the body in the way that quantum physicists have proven the universe is 4% physical matter. So this meat suit we're walking around in is 4% of the picture. So what's the rest of it? It's mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic, metaphysical, sexual, financial, relational, transformational, all of those different aspects, hormonal selves, all of those different aspects of ourself all tie in to make us who and what we are. And so in learning all of those different aspects of the mind, body, spirit, because we do go into a lot of deep body stuff, healing the gut, liver detoxification pathways, biochemistry, like lots of different bits that we access. We're also doing that mind stuff, the psychological stress. Do, a whole, I think it's weekend and a half, 2 weekends on the brain integration, or probably more, it's way more actually, because there's other units that also covered brain integration that weren't specifically about the brain. But, we look at all these different systems within the body. We look at the different organs and how they work, not just physically, but metaphysically, so beyond the physical. And we're taking everything in that mind, body, spirit connection into that deeper level of true healing from trauma, the understanding of the emotional resonances that get stuck in the body that stop us from reading it and healing it. And so, in learning all of that stuff over the course of that 4 years, and literally finding new things and going, I need to learn that too, I need to learn that too, I need to learn that too. And so I did all of the advanced classes that the college had to offer. I did total body modification, the first 3 units, which is another sort of form of kinesiology. I did my Reiki and Reiki Advanced. I did all of this stuff because I just knew that the more I learned, the less I knew, and the more I wanted to know. And it's still the case in that way. I've actually banned myself from courses for this year because I just don't need another piece of paper as much as I want to do them for my own benefit. But I think in that it gives you the understanding of yourself. It gives you the way to ask yourself the questions that help you get the answer of what's going on in your body. So the last couple of months, for example, my Achilles have been playing up. But I've just ended a major 7-year chapter in my life, the 7-year cycle. And I'm stepping into a new one. And it is completely uncertain. So when you think of your Achilles, your ankles, and they're tight, it's stopping you moving forward with ease. And so I can feel, I guess, that fear and uncertainty because there is no certainty in my future. And that's okay. I'm okay with it. But my Achilles are needing time to catch up with where I'm at mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And so I can feel them holding on almost to what was and not fully releasing into what is coming. And so you can see sometimes how those physical ailments end up just not necessarily being about the physical body.
Do you think that all ailments, like physical ailments, like are they all based somewhere else, or are there sometimes that it's the body just in the state of disease because of the body's sake?
I don't think we can ever separate anything out to be just one thing or the other. I think that, say, for example, you are expressing an autoimmune disease. Most people who express autoimmune diseases have been through some kind of trauma, and usually chronic trauma. Often, even when they don't believe it's been chronic trauma, it might be those little drips in a bucket that are happening daily of criticism, of hardness, of not feeling loved, of not feeling worthy, of not feeling safe in their environment. I feel like those emotional triggers flick the switches that allow us to express our genetic predispositions into the world. Because if you think about all of those genetic diseases that are out there that we call genetic diseases, not everybody who has that genetic predisposition will express that in the physical form. And so I really do believe that there are the way that we process stress, because trauma is anything that we find less than nourishing and nurturing. So when you look at trauma in that respect, we are all being traumatized in some ways every day. Now, not all of them do we store in our body as trauma, but so many of them have effects well beyond what we understand in our own worlds. And what I see is that, especially those bigger traumas, being shamed in front of a classroom, being criticized by your parents, being seeing all the marketing messages and knowing that you don't fit that ideal beauty and you go into beating yourself up or starving yourself or, all of those different things that we often do to try and fit that norm, all of that is a traumatic experience. It is not a truly loving, nurturing, nourishing experience for us. And so I think in those, we're turning switches on and off in our body. And that's what creates those genetic expressions in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Even eating the wrong foods and ingesting, all of the pesticides and herbicides and chemicals that they spray on the foods is creating a chemical stress in our body. Now, obviously, we can very rarely avoid all of that stuff. And our liver does take care of some of it. That's what its job is. But when we are overloading it with that kind of food, which, let's face it, through the 80s, we especially were, and because we didn't know about all of those effects back then, or I certainly didn't. And I was too young to care, to be honest. It didn't matter because I was a child and I just ate what was put in front of me. But that chemical stress has an effect on the body and can be traumatic to the body. And so we're not even always aware of all the traumas that we're facing that are flicking these switches. But as a result, I also have a true belief that we can heal anything that goes on in our body if we can just find the right switches then to turn off and not express. So if we can heal those traumatic events, those things that weren't nourishing and nurturing to us, then I truly believe we can come back to a state of health.
Definitely. 100% agree.
Mm.
Um, Earlier you talked about being an empath and having different energies and not knowing which ones were yours and which ones were everyone else's. And I feel like that also would cause stress and trauma on the body. So
Mm.
how did you, obviously it's kind of hard to narrow it down to a couple
Mm.
of sentences, but how did you, like maybe like one tip of how did you figure out how to differentiate?
I think the day I realized I actually did it, I remember it wasn't actually that long ago. It was probably, must have been about 4 years ago because I just met my new partner. Not so new anymore, but we just newly gotten together. And we were driving from his place to wherever we were going. And we pulled up at this set of traffic lights. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" And I realized that I was actually, because all of a sudden I had almost this panic rise up in me and it was sudden. And I'm like, there's nothing for me to be panicked about. And all of a sudden it dropped in. It wasn't mine. I just got that knowingness that it wasn't mine. And so checking with him and he's going, "I'm fine." And I looked over at this guy in the car next to us and I could see this look on his face and I'm like, oh my God, it's his. And I think it was the universe giving me the awareness that not everything was mine. And in that moment, what I ended up doing was, because I don't necessarily want to hand things back. Like if I see that I know it's coming from him, in my understanding of energetics, I don't necessarily want to just hand it back to him because one, that creates a direct connection between us. Even though I'm picking up on what's going on and there is a connection there, I want to neutralize that connection. So I handed it back to the universe and I say, please take it and hand it back to whoever it belongs to. The reason I say that is because it may not even belong to him. So if I just hand it back to him, who knows who he got it from? Maybe his partner came home from work and was having a crappy day and offloaded and projected all of that onto him and he's now expressing it. So I say hand it back to who it belongs to. And if they are meant to find the tools in this lifetime to deal with it, then please help them find it. Because again, it's not up to me for everyone to be doing this work. It's up to the individual to choose whether they do this work or not. And that's why I say if they're meant to find the tools, because I know a number of people who are not meant to find the tools in this lifetime. They express that every day in interactions. And that's okay. That's their life path. But who am I to choose? So that's the way I now deal with that. Now, having had that awareness handed to me by the universe has made my life a lot easier. It helps me to train people a lot easier to be able to do that in the moment. To check in and just ask yourself, is this all mine? If it's not all mine, please hand it back to where it came from. But going to the universe to hand it back via the third party, so to speak, so that we're not creating more direct connections, especially if they're toxic people in our lives or abusive people in our lives. We don't really want to continually reconnect to them in that way. So I like going through the third party. But for me, it's also one of those things that I do regularly. So every morning when I have a shower, I am imagining anything that's not mine being washed away and washed down the drain to be transmuted into something else. So any, hooks, cords, spores, seeds, attachments, whatever you want to call them, anything that doesn't belong to me, unless it's mine to deal with. Because some people do hand us lessons and things that aren't ours so that we can learn new ways of being and new ways to deal with it. So I guess that's the way I do it. But the more you get to know your body, the more you very quickly recognize what's yours and what's not, because you can feel the difference. So my anxiety feels different to the way that I feel other people's anxiety, for example.
Wow.
It has a different vibrational quality to it.
So it's
Mm.
all about like that awareness and having that being able to get to a level where you can even be aware of these different things. That's incredible.
Mm. And practice on the way there. This has been certainly 7 years of very, very deep practice for me and daily practice. And so it is also about that consistency. And I'm the same as any other human being. When things are going really well, oh, I don't need to do my practices today, or there's an excuse. And it's about actually practicing when things are going well as when they're not. Because then those tools and those practices are top of mind when the shit does hit the fan. Because we know it's going to at some point, regularly, often, because we're human and we're living this experience. So it's really about noticing and being in that space where you can go, okay, what tools are available to me to help with the situation right now?
Yeah, I love that. So it's like you're
Mm.
building up like your little toolbox when things are going good, because I
Mm.
feel like when things are going bad, you don't even know if you didn't have that like preparation, you wouldn't even know where to turn.
Mm.
And I feel like that's where
Yeah.
it does get sometimes people get into like these like dark holes. And then I love that you mentioned that some people are just not meant to do the work in this lifetime.
Mm.
But I feel like what I have a hard time with is one, being okay with that. I know that's like my own thing to work with, but the
Yeah.
other one is how do we interact with these people? Like, is it healthier to just cut them off, or is it? I know it's not up to us to help them find this path if they're just not meant to find it. So, like, how do you balance that?
So the way that I've come to have compassion and empathy for that, because again, I want everyone to be on this journey. It is so hard and awesome and scary and uncertain and fabulous and wonderful and awe-filled and all of the things. And it adds so much richness and vibrancy to our life. And it's not easy. Let's face it, delving into the deepest parts of your soul and learning how to love all the shitty bits within you is a challenging pursuit. And it's also incredible. The way that I look at it is say you're driving down the road and there's this big hardware store, and I know that there is everything in there for me to build this freaking amazing castle. I can build whatever I want. There are all of the tools, there are all of the materials. I don't know how to use them all yet, but I'm curious. So I'm going to try and learn, and I'm going to learn as much as I can about all of the things in there. Now, my son, when he was about 18 months, had this little pair of dungarees and a little collared shirt. And I remember, putting together something in the garden with my mum. Actually, she was over for a visit, and he's gone, we had the big adult tools left, and he's, trying to use his plastic toolkit. Now, he's not going to be able to do too much in terms of building, let alone building a big castle with his Fisher Price toolkit. He's going to need something else. But he was really happy and he thought he was helping. And when people are acting unresourcefully, I still see them in that same outfit running to get their little Fisher Price toolkit. Now, other people will drive down the road past this, hardware store. They won't see it. It's not for them, not interested, barely even notice it. Some people will look at it and go, not mine, not going in there. Others will, maybe go to the gardening section or the paints or the, home, whatever it is. They might get a few hooks to hang things on the wall and make things look pretty. That's the way that I sort of look at this personal development journey. I want to know how to use all of the things in the hardware store. But if I handed my 18-month-old some of the power tools, he'd have killed himself because they're too big and powerful for him. So it was not age appropriate. Now, certain people being stuck at those traumatized ages, it'd be the same kind of thing. You don't want to hand the power tools when they're struggling to use their plastic ones. There's that graduation process. And so I know that kind of makes it very linear, but it helps me to develop empathy and compassion for people who are like, no, I know everything. Now, they may know everything about the lighting or about the gardening or about the painting, but they don't know everything about all of it. And I certainly don't either, which is why I'm in that curious phase of, I know there's so much more out there to learn and to know and to understand, and I'm willing to learn as much of it as I can.
Yeah, thank you so much for that metaphor. I feel like I've never heard of it in that way, and that just makes so much sense because it's that whole thing of that no one's better than anybody else. We're all just in that learning phase, but we have different phases of that learning
Hmm.
phase. So like even like
Hmm.
with your toddler with the plastic tools, like that is exactly what he needed at that time too,
Hmm.
to do what he needed to do and to like learn all about how do these plastic tools work and going from that so that you can move on. So
Hmm.
amazing. Thank you so much for that. All right. So are you ready to do some would you rathers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So would you rather have the power to manifest your desires or the ability to heal yourself and others? They're hard.
Both.
They're hard. There's no right answer.
I already, to be honest, I think both are exactly in my reality now. So I do both. I work on healing my body every single day. I work on manifesting my desires every single day and tuning into those intentions of what I want to bring into manifest reality.
Yeah, I feel like they're both gonna end like back to my little mountain here. They're both gonna end up
Yeah.
and you up at the mountain, but it's like which way to go. So I feel like by doing both of what
Yeah.
you're saying, it's like you're kind of going zigzag up to the
Yeah.
perfect. Um, the next one is would you rather have the ability to forgive and help others let go of grudges or the ability it's kind of like the same thing but this is with the manifesting of the strong sense of self-worth, so now like shifting the lens to the self-worth part, like helping others find their self-worth, or by you focusing on your self-worth that's how it's going to help others.
I actually think everything starts with ourselves. I think when we can manifest our own self worth and really, truly anchor into it, then we naturally come to a place of forgiveness, of healing, of compassion and empathy. And my number one value is self mastery, and that's not selfish. That is because the more deeply I understand myself and believe in myself, the more empathy and compassion I have for other people. And so for me, it all starts with ourself and changing that.
Yeah, I see that. You just like sparked something in my mind that a different guest said about
Mm,
that when you're working on yourself just by being you and being your most authentic and self and
mm,
expressing yourself, that is how other people heal by you focusing on you. That's like that energy is then going to help everyone else. So it's kind of like
yeah.
the same thing. Okay, so now I'm going to just like shout out some words and just the first thing that
Yeah.
pops into your mind.
Yep.
All right. Fitness,
Necessary. Absolutely necessary. Yep.
relationships,
For me, they all need to be reciprocal. They don't need to be equal in their balance, but they need to be reciprocal. If you're not getting something, if somebody's always taking from you, you are always giving, or you are always taking, it's going to end in a
definitely.
disastrous way.
Yeah.
So for me, relationships, it's reciprocal.
Feminine energy.
This is a really interesting one. I've actually had to balance a number of people who have been on all of these divine feminine workshops, and they're basically ignoring their masculine. And I've done it myself, whereby we put so much energy into the feminine that we deny, shame, and ignore our internal masculine without intending to. And so for me, it is really important in our feminine embodiment work to also honor our masculine. He needs to be honored. He needs to know he has a place. Because when I was doing my feminine embodiment work, my feminine was like, this massive Amazonian kick ass woman. But my internal masculine became like this short, angry little man who was like, well, hang on a minute. I was running the show for so long and now I'm being ignored and shoved into a corner. So I'd reverse the roles almost. And so I think it's really important to make sure that your internal divine masculine and feminine have a relationship with one another that is a marriage, that is a union where they are both supporting and loving one another. Because otherwise we're missing half the picture.
Wow. I want to dive into that. So let's finish this and then we'll dive more into that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So the next one is astrology.
I think astrology is an incredible overview of what paths the universe wants to walk. Whether we listen to them or not is our own free will choice. But I think it is the highest expression of where we can go if we choose to
Definitely.
use it. The same as archetypal stuff. It is the pinnacle of where we want to go. Whether or not we choose to go there is a whole other question and story.
Mhm. And I want to dive into that too. So just a quick question and then we'll
Yeah.
go back to it. So with astrology, this is just like something that I've thought of, so I just wanted to
Mm,
get your feedback on it.
yeah.
That I feel like with astrology, it's like mathematically speaking, it's like all the
Mm,
different ways that the universe could express itself through all the different
yeah.
lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so by us choosing to fulfill that or not, I feel like somebody is somewhere is going to have to fulfill that. So if we don't
Mm,
get it done in this lifetime, then we're going to have a similar chart or like the parts that we didn't get to work on the last lifetime will be for the next one.
mm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think we need to understand, and we're never going to, the bigger picture of all of it. And I think that's where source energy, universe, God, whatever you want to call it, comes in,
Mhm.
is that we are very much looking at this massive overarching picture that we are never going to understand and being okay with that. Now, I do believe in past lives, I believe in future lives, I believe in all of that stuff. And also, I know that we all have free will choice on where we go with all of that and how we express it in the world. So for me, that's really, really vital, is understanding that, because it helps me to then be able to choose that higher expression and that higher path.
Definitely. Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying there. That I feel like the universe tells me that all the time. Like
Mm,
you can't possibly understand like the magnitude of everything,
yeah.
but for some reason I'm just like how you were saying earlier, I'm just so curious that
Mm,
I want to know how to work out all the tools like in your metaphor,
yeah.
but I also want to know like the history, like how did it even get
Yeah.
here? Like how did this hardware store even get built? Like all those questions, and sometimes I have to take a
Yeah.
step back and say, well, I can't possibly know all of that right now. Like just focus on the power tool that I'm trying to
Mm,
master. Well, not even master,
yeah.
because I don't feel think that you could master all of them. Or I feel like
No.
there's always more to learn about
Mm.
um, everything. But
And I think the really important bit for us to understand and for us to acknowledge is we're not supposed to know it all. And that's a very humbling thought, because we're taught as human beings that, we're the master race and we run the world and we are superior. And all of those things are taught to us throughout our lives, that we have, the intellectual capacity beyond anything else on the planet. And I just go, ugh, like that whole messaging now feels so skeevy and disgusting to me.
mhm.
But being able to sit with that and understand that we're not supposed to know it all. We can only know what we know. And when we know different, we can do different and we can learn different. But until we know different, or until we find out there is a different, I used to think that my marriage was normal. I thought that it being so hard, because I'd always been told relationships were hard work. Now, I stayed for years longer than I should have, because I just thought I was getting an A+ at this hard relationship thing and, kicking it out the park, because I never actually wanted to spend time with my ex-husband because he was mean to me. But I thought, no, this is what marriage is supposed to be. It's supposed to be hard work. Now that I'm in another relationship that is loving, I understand the hard work of relationships is so different from what I thought it was. But again, it wasn't that my mother was wrong in what she said to me. It was my perception of what she said that was incorrect. It was a different type of hard
Yeah,
that is
perception
the
is
hard that
everything.
you are supposed to go through. And I think, that's kind of the example, is we don't know. The number of people in my journey who'd look at me and go, what you experienced wasn't like normal. And I'd be going, no, explain more. And they'd explain to me again what a healthy relationship was supposed to be, or why what somebody said to me was so abusive, basically. Because I didn't understand. It was just what people told me. So I just accepted it at face value. And I think those nuances on my micro world are now what I see in the macro world. We don't know what normal is because everybody is living their normal. So we have to look at what could be possible for me, which is where we bring in curiosity and inquisitiveness. And I think without that humbleness, without being humble, we cannot access all of the other things, because we're not supposed to know everything. And that's a really hard thing as a human being who's been trained that we're supposed to know everything. And we're supposed to, I mean, you look at it online, everybody is supposed to be an expert on every subject and they all try to be. But when you can admit that you're not, I know a lot about what I know about, but I don't know a lot about stuff I don't know a lot about. And there's a lot of stuff I don't know anything about. And there's a lot of stuff that I will just dream about because I wonder what could be possible. And I think it's having the humility to be able to say exactly that, And I think that's where astrology as that bigger picture comes in. We can be led by the stars, and we were for hundreds of thousands of years. We can be led by the stars. We can honor the stars. We can allow them to make us feel so small and insignificant that we end up feeling completely significant because we realize we are an integral part of the whole. And that's where that paradox starts to come in.
Yeah. That's amazing because I have had those experiences where you just feel so small and it's like that humbling experience, exactly what you're saying, that you're
Mm,
not supposed to know it all and all of these things.
mm,
But to have that other side of the coin that, but I am important too because I am an integral part of this whole
mm,
magical thing. So that's a cool way of thinking about it because I feel like sometimes you get
mm.
into like, well, not you, but like me,
Yeah.
get into these
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Well,
existential
we all
crises.
do because we're human.
Yeah, of like, well, like what am I, just a speck of dust that doesn't matter, like stuff like that, you know? But you're
Yeah.
right, it's like really beautiful how it all comes together.
Mm. And I think that's one of the things about the spiritual journey is being comfortable with that paradox. I am both the most insignificant speck of dust in the universe and the most important one at the same time. Because without me, the balance of the world as we know it, if you think of the entire universe as a massive tapestry, if we take out that string of thread that is you, that tapestry is not going to be complete.
Wow, yeah.
And so, and some people will notice that hole not as a tiny thread that's missing, but a massive gaping crater.
Or even like when you get like a run in your sweater or something, that one
Yeah,
little string.
exactly. Yeah, that little
Yeah.
catch, and you're like, damn it. But you know that you're the only person who's noticing it.
Hmm.
And I think it's being able to comfortably hold that paradox. And that to me is that spiritual work. It's not either or, and we're so trained to be either or this. But it can be both and more. And that's where we're working in. And that's the field that we're really trying to hold comfortably in our hands.
Exactly. And that's like the whole part of this podcast is how can we be
Yeah.
fully divine and fully human, fully divine where we have this like great, amazing, like we're the most important, like exactly what you said, most important, but also human where being human isn't a bad thing. Being human, like having
No.
these imperfections is so beautiful and so magical in and of itself.
Yeah.
So I
And
love,
to me, that's the magic as well, is that it is that we have chosen to be here in this 3D physical reality. We've chosen to be incarnate on Mother Earth. It is not a journey toward, so that we suffer our entire lives so that we can die and end up in heaven. To me, that's the biggest lie we've ever been told, that life is for suffering, and it's bullshit. Who creates a child to make them suffer their entire life and then promises them, when you die, it'll all be better? And I think that metaphor of that death into heaven is actually us dying to that old way of believing that suffering is our birthright and starting to understand that we can find that magic and mystery and awe of the universe while we are here in this 3D reality. But we are all choosing to be on this 3D reality. Otherwise, we'd be somewhere else. Otherwise, we'd be doing somewhere else. So you have chosen to be here now. So everyone who dismisses the human condition as a sin or as less than or as, some kind of blight, you've chosen it for a reason. How can you learn to love it more? How can you learn to try and see the magic and the beauty of it a bit more? If we weren't in physical form, we'd never be able to hug anybody else or touch anybody else or pat our dogs or walk on the beach. So, you know what? There is so much that we can experience in this body. And I know because I was in that suffering place. I thought my entire life was here just to be this massive ball of suffering. And yet now I almost pinch myself every day because I'm like, this place is so freaking magical.
that's incredible. I love that how
Mm.
you put that too about like how we can't hug if we don't have this body. And then it goes back to the whole like
Mm,
taking care of your body and making sure that
yeah.
we are aligned in that too, because I believe that by aligning our mind, body, and spirit, that's why I like separating them, so that we know how to align
Yeah.
them, so then that we can express ourselves, so that we can be fully human and fully divine,
Mm,
all at the same
yeah.
time. So I want to get into your book now. So,
Yes.
your book, Divine Messy Human, a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truth over external influence. So, could you tell us a little bit about it?
So it was one of those books that I wrote basically to allow people to realize that it is okay to be divinely messy. We can be part of that divinity of God and of Source and the Creator and infinite wisdom, whatever you want to call that higher power. And also, we're here to have that messy human experience. It will be tumultuous. There will be amazing days and shitty days and everything in between. There will be times where we feel like the lights have gone out and we cannot see our next step. We will feel like we are in that tunnel forever, and then we're not. And rather than denying that experience, and I see that in that spiritual bypassing that people do, and in that spiritual materialism and that side of the spiritual industry, where I have all the answers and you better pay me a shit ton of money to be able to get them. It doesn't sit with me. We all have divinity within us. My job with my clients is not to tell them how to heal. It is to facilitate what their body is trying to tell them. And so Divine Messy Human was about acknowledging that we all have access to this divinity. We are all going to be messy. And that entire mishmash creates our humanity. And we are here choosing to have that human experience. And so I talk about, a lot of those bigger themes, balancing our masculine and feminine principles. And again, when I talk about masculine and feminine, it's not about gender, it is about the archetypal masculine and feminine, the two halves of the whole. It is about, looking at why we have a propensity for darkness in our thoughts. I have a story in there about, that I used to tell myself I was broken, but I was never broken. And nobody is ever broken. They are walking a path that is trying to tell them that maybe there's something else. Maybe a different choice could make you feel differently. I felt like an empty shell of a human being at one point, and I honestly wondered if my life was worth living. And yet, there was also this drawing need in me to start down this path, to find these people to help me. And, I haven't walked this path on my own. There have been a lot of mentors, a lot of teachers, a lot of practitioners from a lot of different modalities who have all been integral parts of this journey, integral parts of my education, and integral parts of me turning this information into knowledge, into wisdom. And so the book is about some of those tools and techniques we can use. It's about giving you some of the understanding of where you're at and why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. And it's done in a relatively accessible way. It's short chapters. I've made sure it's 12 font because a lot of my clients are sort of in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And I'm like, you know what? We don't always want to have to put our glasses on to read. So let's make it a decent sized font. I've made it as easy to read, shorter paragraphs, shorter chapters. And it is almost the fact that almost every chapter could be an entire novel in itself. Yet I wanted those broad brush strokes. And even in the fact that every chapter could be, or every paragraph or chapter could be a whole book in itself, I haven't skipped the bits. It's like the broad brush strokes. It's a really beautiful overview, and who knows what it'll lead to. I know there's more books in the pipeline, whether it is expanding it into going deeper into those subjects or whether it's something completely different. I haven't been told yet, so I'll just wait and see. But it really was the book that could have helped me a number of years ago by putting, 7 years plus of experience and education into words. Um, and yeah, it just, one of the things I'm so proud of is there's people who are new on the journey who've given me the feedback that it's super accessible. And even though it goes into some deep esoteric stuff, it's done in a way that isn't confusing. And it's done in a way that it's okay however you receive it. And there's people who've been on the path for a long time going, oh my God, I needed that reminder. Oh, I love the way you put that. So they're getting stuff out of it as well.
I love that sometimes, like with information, that sometimes you need to be told in a different way to finally grasp it, to like let it seep into your like
Mm,
subconscious. And so I feel like that is what your book could be too. That even though like it's
mm,
for good for all levels, if you're starting
mm,
out or if you have been on this journey for a while, but just like having that reminder. But I love that you brought up the
mm.
whole part about feeling broken, because I feel like you're not alone in that. I feel like so many
No.
people feel that. And I felt it too. And it's interesting that we both wrote a book
Mhm.
about it, because I wrote a book about it too. But mine is, I placed it in like a fictional world, kind of like what you're saying, to like make it
Yep.
accessible, but to make
Beautiful.
it accessible in like a story so that people could see themselves in it, but also be
Mm.
removed from it if they're not ready to look in the mirror and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But it's exactly what you're
Mm.
saying, like having those different mentors. And in my book, she's in this like dark tunnel, exactly what you're saying. She's in this dark
Mm.
tunnel, and then she meets people who help her get to where she needs to go.
Mm.
So I just thought that was like really magical, how the universe brought us together to have this conversation, and we ended up being that we have similar backgrounds without even knowing
Mm.
it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think the interesting thing about the brokenness is I was told I was broken and I believed it. And I think so often society or loved ones do tell us that we are broken, that there is something wrong with us. But they're coming from their perspective and their experience. We're never broken. We just see the world differently. If we didn't have neurodiversity, how boring would the world be? I
Mhm.
love talking to neurodivergent people because it gives me new perspectives on how to look at the world and how many, even people with depression and anxiety, they see the world differently, and it can be fascinating to understand the way they look at the world because even some of the most depressed people I've come across see beauty in the most unexpected places. And it's like, wow, you've got so much to teach.
Yeah, that's what
And
I love too.
yet society keeps telling us we're broken, that there's something wrong with us. And part of that is to keep us trapped in that patriarchal machine of you're not good enough. You need these products, you need these cars, you need this stuff to make you feel better and to be that next best thing. And yet you're actually perfect just as you are.
Exactly. So getting into that though, now bringing
Mm,
back the whole masculine and feminine,
yeah.
that for me growing up, exactly what you're saying, like having all these like different
Mm,
messages and saying that you're not enough and all these different things. I ended up hating my masculine side, but then fearing
mm,
my feminine side. So then I was just, then I definitely, then I told myself that that's why I'm broken, because I can't even get with these two.
yep.
So could you give us some tips of how to balance them?
The way that there's a couple of different analogies that I use for that masculine and feminine. So I used to think that me holding space was that feminine aspect because, and it is, and it also isn't. If you think about the uterus, it is the only organ that stays empty until there's a job to do. Nothing grows in there. It is an empty space.
Wow.
So it is about holding space, that whole organ. Yet when we look at a river, the riverbank's job is to hold space in a masculine way. It is holding the water. Without a riverbank, water is destructive. And we've seen the flooding in Australia, so horrifically. If a riverbank doesn't hold the water, which is the feminine, it spills out and it gets destructive. Whereas when the riverbank is guiding that river, where it needs to go. There will be those moments of raging. There will be the little soft pools out to the side. There'll be areas of stagnancy, and it contains all of it and directs it where it needs to go, holding space beautifully. The womb holds space in a different way. It's just there until it's needed. So there's two different aspects to it. And looking at that, river as the analogy, if we're putting dams in it and blocking, then it is very much easier for all of that destructive emotion to get out and not have that safe container in which to be. So what we're looking at in balancing that masculine and feminine is not trying to destroy the masculine. It's also not trying to force the river to go in a certain direction. It's allowing it to go where it needs to go and giving it a safe container in which to express itself. What we often do in our masculine, because of societal conditioning, is we strive and we force and we push and, we just do it. And I mean, you look at so many company slogans and they are so patriarchal and masculine and not healthily so. And it's like, no, just, I don't need to strive. I don't need to push. I see it in the coaching industry all the time. If you're not hitting 5, 6, now 7-figure months, you're not a good enough coach. And everybody has the course that will help you get there. But what I see in that, I see shame. I see predatory behavior. I see people basically making money off other people's imposter syndrome and their own insecurities. That's the way they're getting to their 5, 6, 7-figure months often, is by preying on other people who are feeling ashamed that they're not at that yet. So even in that, I see that nasty side of patriarchy. Yet when you look at the feminine aspect, it is being of service in a way that looks at the whole. How can I support you best? What do you need? And this is why I still work one-on-one. Everyone's like, when are you doing group stuff? All of that. No, I will still work one-on-one. If I'm going to do group stuff, it will be speaking on a stage in front of however many people. I will not get rid of my one-on-one so I can make more money in a one-to-many scenario. Yeah, I imagine there'll be group stuff in the future, and I do love running workshops and I do love that stuff. But my mainstay is actually about, how do I help you? I don't want to delve into your deep traumas in a group scenario, because I can't then make sure that that container is sealed and safe for you to then walk out into the world. And often in these group containers, I've had to work with people who've been to some big name motivational speakers, and I've had to balance them because they've been taught to open up and let all this stuff go. But energetically, they've not then been sealed up. So they're collecting all of this stuff that other people are chucking out, and they're coming out going, oh my God, I feel way worse than when I went in. I don't want to have that effect on people. And so you can see, in terms of that masculine feminine balance, it's a both and. It's a looking at a part, being part of the whole, and how does that all affect? It's looking at the whole picture, not just the masculine, not just the feminine. If we were just in our emotional selves and watery, it would be so destructive. There'd be no structure, there'd be no logic, there'd be no control. Likewise, if we're constantly striving and forcing and pushing and, moving forward, and also we can't have one without the other. That's why the Chinese did the symbol the way they did. The black is the feminine with the dot of the masculine in it. The white is the masculine with the black dot of the feminine in it. We cannot have one without the other. They need to combine to make the whole. They have to. We cannot have an in-breath without an out-breath, or we're dead. And the in-breath is the feminine, the out-breath is the masculine. We can't have one muscle contract without other muscles relaxing. So we have to have the feminine and the masculine working together.
Yeah.
One in its active state and others in their inactive state. We can't do feminine embodiment without honoring our masculine, or we're denying our own selves. It's about bringing the two together, having them marry each other harmoniously and be in union with one another, so that they can, our inner masculine and feminine can serve our expression in the world, whatever that may be. And that's, I think, is so, so important. And what we've been taught is that the unhealthy, the unhealed, the wounded, immature masculine is the way that we're supposed to get through life, is by fighting and scrapping and brawling and fighting and striving and pushing. And, you know, I still remember this ad in Australia for cold and flu medication. It's like, soldier on. And it was about, you know, even if you're sick, take a couple of tablets and keep going. Now, one of the things I have loved about COVID is people are damn well staying home when they're sick. About bloody time we started doing that again. We're supposed, our body is sick because it's saying, you need to rest. You've been going too long. And what often happens, I know every time I get unwell, I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, my body was giving me signs that I was doing too much, that I needed to slow down, and I ignored it. I have one client who gets severe migraines because she will not stop. She will not stop until a migraine slaps her down, and then she has to stop. She has no choice. And we're working on all of the conditioning that is creating that response in her, whereby she can choose to step back and to stop before it gets to a point where she's smacked down in pain and forced to stop.
Wow. Yeah, I love it. Love that. That's so much to think about. So thank you so much for putting it in that way, because, well, for grounded spirits, I made it this way, that this is the mountains, the masculine, and then the waters, like the feminine.
Yeah.
But the way that you put it just makes so much more sense. And then even in my book, I have this like this river that keeps coming back up because she's not ready to just like go with the flow.
Yeah.
But the way that you put it too, that it's about the holding the space, that sometimes it is good to just go with the flow, but sometimes it is good to sit on the sidelines and just allow the river to go through. So amazing. So my last question is, how are you a grounded spirit, and how could you help others get to become grounded spirits?
For me, I think it is about truly accepting our humanity and our messiness within our divinity. It is being fully anchored to the earth where we have chosen to live. You know how wonderful it is when you go into a meditation, you go up into your top chakras, because they all spin fast and you get that beautiful, you know, buzzing and energetic shift. But when we're fully grounded, we can actually reach higher heights. And when we accept our humanity, when we love the entirety of our being, our shadows, our shit, our love, our light, the whole lot, we are truly loving the entirety of our human experience. And therefore, we naturally become grounded spirits, because we're not fighting against parts of ourselves. We're not denying parts of ourselves. We're not just stuck in that love and light spiritual bypassing. It's, you know, I actually got angry the other morning walking along the beach because someone was wearing this good vibes only t-shirt. And I'm like, oh my God, you are missing out on half of life. Because if we just want the good vibes, when, you know, we're denying half of our experience. When we know true grief, it's because we've known real love. When we know true happiness, it's also because we've known despair. We need opposing emotions so that we can have the full emotional landscape presented to us. If we just, you know, so many clients come into me and say, I just want to be happy. And I said, well, if you are happy all the time, we're going to need to get you medication because that's called manic. And it is actually a problem. And I don't want you to be in that manic state. Nobody trusts anyone who's happy all the time because you know it's fake. I'm sorry, but you just do. What we want is a little place within us where we can access peace, even when things are falling apart around us. The last few times I have had some major breakdowns, there's probably been 3 in the last year, like major breakdowns, where I have almost been begging God to just take me home because I'm just like, I can't do human anymore. Just take me home, But even in those moments, there was this peace and acceptance of going, I know I'm not done here. And I know you're never going to let that happen. And there was a peace and acceptance in that. And to me, that is actually a much more powerful place to be than searching for happiness. Because happiness, it's not fleeting, but every emotion only lasts a certain amount of time in the body. And so for me, that grounded spirit aspect comes from knowing things aren't always going to be smooth, but knowing that even in the darkness, we can access part of the light.
Exactly. Thank you so, so much. It has been amazing to talk to you and to be able to pick at your brain. And I feel like I just learned so much. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for bringing the work you're bringing into the world because it's so, so needed. So thank you.
Thank you. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you learned something or something resonated with you, please give this podcast a 5-star review wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. And just thank you again to Amanda because it has literally, like, this information has literally changed my life. Like, completely 100%, like, led me down the right path. So the one I want to, like, get to the most is the metaphor of the feminine energy being the river and then the masculine energy being the mountain. And it's crazy to me how I didn't understand this before, but now it just like makes so much sense. When I am being too structured and I'm not allowing the river to go through, that's called building a dam. And Amanda talks about it a little bit, but I wanted to go deeper into it. That's literally anxiety. Like, anxiety is you blocking it, and then you have an overflow of this, like, feminine energy. And then that is what causes you to, like, spin out of control. When if you just, like, what I've been doing this week is, ever since I learned this, that, that the feminine energy, what you have to do if you're nervous or anxious or excited or any of those like get your blood pumping kind of emotions, what you literally have to picture is just water going through you, and it's literally just energy, so any kind of flow. So I've learned that depending on your rising sign, like that's what your go-to is. So if you're like an air sign, it feels really good to like blow. It sounds so weird, but if you like actually like blow on your skin, it like soothes you. And then like with water, if you have a water sign, it could be like taking a shower, like literally allowing the actual water to cleanse you and to allow this energy to just run through you without the anxiety. Because when you have anxiety, that's your masculine side freaking out, and so it's like putting barriers, so like literally damming the flow of energy. And then that's also like how you put your walls up. That's masculine. Like any kind of like structure like that that's inhibiting the flow of things, that's feminine energy, that is where it's wrong. And not necessarily wrong, I shouldn't say wrong because there's no wrong or right, but by blocking that, there's an imbalance. That's the best way of putting it. That there's an imbalance between the two. And so literally by just understanding the mountain and the river analogy, it just makes so much sense. And then now I can be like, oh, okay, like I'm being too masculine in this energy. Like I'm putting too many restrictions on myself. I'm not allowing my energy to flow. Then I can change it. By becoming aware, you can change things. So that was just absolutely wild. The next one that completely changed my life was the hardware store analogy. That people are literally at different points in their lives, because I feel like that's why they say that comparison is the thief of joy, because you can't possibly know what that person is struggling with. They may still be using the plastic tools while you're using power tools, but that's all perspective, you know? Maybe they think that these tools are super high tech and that you're, you know what I mean? Like then they think that, you know, it's just it's like this whole thing about, but the point is that we are all going to the hardware store and we're all going to take the things that we need. It goes back to like the whole abundance mindset. Everything that you possibly need is right there in front of you. You just have to like use it. And you have to know not to take too much. You have to know what level you're at, like what is going to bring you the most good. And that's how it's gonna help you. And then when you're done with it, you put it back so that somebody else can use that tool. But it was just so magical to like think about it in this like hardware store place, like all of these tools that we learn about and that we can use, and that we shouldn't shame anybody for using different tools, because they could be using them in their own way that's going to help them. And that was just like so beautiful. The next one that I wanted to talk about how it completely changed my life was, I wrote it all down so I wouldn't forget, and now here I am already forgetting. Oh, give back energy that doesn't belong to you, for sure. So that has like really stuck with me too, that like understanding like what's yours and what's not yours. So again, it's all about becoming aware of something so that then you can change it, because that's like the first step, is to become aware. So just to become aware of what does your energy feel like, what's the vibe of your energy. That is how you can distinguish when there's some energy that doesn't belong to you. And the simultaneously the most and least important person in the universe, this hit me so hard. Because it's so true that I love that metaphor about the sweater. Because now, like, when I love sewing, and I was sewing, my dogs like to chew through their harnesses, and so I was like sewing it back up and like making it nice. And there was this like little string, and I'm like, oh, I better cut this string, because if they pull on it, it's gonna completely like ruin it, you know? And that brought me back to like this metaphor, this conversation with Amanda, that we're literally like a piece of string could be lost, you know, like if you cut it and it's like just like thrown in the wind, like it could be completely lost. But when it's in its right spot, it literally makes all the difference. And like how magical is that we all have like our perfect spot, where if we're not there, it like the whole thing is ruined. Like for my harness, for instance, that line that I sewed back in there, if I pull that out, the harness is ruined. It doesn't have any use. Like, that's how important we are. But then it's also like, if we're just like willy-nilly flying through the wind, we aren't that important. Because we do have a purpose. And I know there's a lot of creators out there that say like, I feel like it's all about the balance, you know, that some people are like, oh, like you shouldn't try to go find your purpose because you're not here on a mission, you're here to experience. And I 100% believe in that too. But what I'm trying to say is that by you're here to experience certain things, but the thing is that that's why you have these desires. The desires are the ones that will dictate where you go, what kind of experiences you have by your desires and by the belief in your desires. And that's why this whole podcast is about self-expression. It's about how can we be our truest selves so that we can find the spot where that is for us. So back to the whole string thing, but also so that we can experience something that no one else has experienced, because no one else is us. No one else has this unique perspective. So we owe it to the universe to be our most authentic, self-expressive selves. You know? So that's something to think about. And yeah, so like I said, completely changed my life. Like, these metaphors have made me understand so much about my own life and my own spiritual journey. And so I'm just so thankful for Amanda for sharing these. So if you want to learn more about me or about Amanda, I'll post everything below in the link. So get you to the link on the website, the page on the website, where I'll have information about her book. I'll have her website, all of that, her bio, everything will be on the website. And I'll probably type these up too briefly. I'm not going to go in depth like I did here, but I'll have little bullet points so that you don't forget. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. Next week, it's going to be so cool. We have Mozart Jimenez joining us, and she is a 420 artist. Literally go check her out on Instagram. She's so cool. Her art is to destigmatize marijuana, and we had this great conversation. I bring out my book too, called All About Weed, and we just talk about destigmatizing it. We talk about the benefits of this magical plant, because it's literally so amazing. And yeah, we talk about her journey being a woman from Mexico, coming to North Carolina, all of that, how to keep her light, how to keep her light glowing in the midst of adversity. And yeah, it was a really cool conversation, so that'll be next week. So until then, see you later.